Hello, everyone out there in the world of the strange. Welcome to this fine November 10th of a Monday in this beautiful world that we are currently living in. I wish everybody a wonderful eve. I hope we've had a great day, and this is where we're at today. You're with me here, and this is what we're going to go through on this fine evening. They say every culture has had a word for it. Magic, spirit, imagination, inspiration. That strange current that moves through us when we create, when we tell stories, when we believe something deeply enough that it starts to become finally real. Magic isn't about superstition or illusion or cards or pulling rabbits out of hats and sparkles and wands. It can be, but that's not what we're talking about. It's more about intention, imagination, discipline, willpower. It's the art of shaping reality through symbol, sound, and meaning, through the stories we tell and the ones we choose to live by. Before there were books or movies or comic books, there were myths told around fires. There were hieroglyphs written on walls. There were pictorial images in the cave. There were spells woven through magic and language. And in a way, we've never actually stopped doing those types of things. Every story we tell instills changes in us. It still writes the world into being. Writers like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, they just say it out loud. As you saw in the thumbnail, that is Alan Moore. The other one in the middle is Grant Morrison. These are two of my favorite comic book authors and writers and magicians. And when they write, they're not just building worlds. They're invoking something else. So tonight, we're going to explore what magic really means, where it comes from, how it's evolved through time, and why it might be the oldest form of storytelling that we have. We'll listen to a few clips from Morrison, and we'll trace how their philosophies and their strange mechanics of belief, some would say, came into being, where they come from, where they are today. Because if magic is the art of changing reality through will and imagination, then maybe every story we tell is a spell. Welcome to Magus in the Media, where we, together, like this fine evening, explore the myth, the magic, and the meaning hidden in the stories that we love. Let's get into it. So, on this fine evening, I hope everyone is doing well tonight. We're doing it live. Hello, fine, fair Devlin. Hello, Dusty, on this good evening. Thank you, Twisted Bricks. What's up, my man? Everyone should go over, not right now, do it after the stream, to Twisted Bricks' YouTube channel. He is brilliant with Lego stop-go animation. I highly envision and advise all of you to head on over there and listen and watch all of his things. It's magic. It's magic in action. You should see it. The man's brilliant. And Sketchy, it's nice to see you as well. Ahoy, ahoy, ahoy. So, this is where we're at tonight, November 10th, 7:05 p.m., starting with a story. And this story goes back as old as time. As old as time. Time is all we have. Time is where we come from. Time is where we go. Time, the Saturnian being, that old god, that Kronos-like figure who gave birth to those that we know as Zeus and so forth and so on. Time. Time is how it all starts. It starts with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh, right? That's one way to tell the story of time. Another way to tell the story of time is that understanding of dear Prometheus, another one of those great titans, as he created man because he wanted something to be there, to play with, right? Prometheus then stole the fire of the gods from Zeus, and he brought it down to us, mere mortals. And as mortals, what do we do with that? We make fire. So we have the ability to cook food. And as some would say, we have the ability then to have a second stomach when we have the ability to cook said food. Thus our brains grow bigger, and we have the ability to go hunt more and feed more and more. And feeding more and more, we have the ability to create more and more. And in this creation, we can build small little villages. We had a dream around that fire after Prometheus brought it down to us. And that dream was, what would it be like to explore the hidden depths of the world? What would it be like to explore the darkness? It's not only where that is what we think where our food comes from, right? And the animals, as we explore the jungles and the deserts. But it's also where those unknown unknowns come from, things we couldn't even imagine. So what if we just did that around that campfire that Prometheus gave us? We started to imagine what it would be like. What would it be like if I could, as they'd say, around this fire, let's go out and let's capture a saber-toothed tiger, right? My history of dinosaurs and what happened in the prehistoric period is quite faint. So that's not the meaning of this Magus in the Media evening with us. What is Magick? Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, and the birth of storytelling, right? And why storytelling is so important in Magick. But what I'm getting at is, some say that we thought that what we would do is we would go up against the cave walls and we would start drawing what it would be like. So they say there's these stick images of hunters stabbing dinosaurs or saber-toothed. Obviously, the humans and dinosaurs may not existed. And side note, what if dinosaurs were actually dragons? I just want to put that out there. Dinosaurs could be dragons. And the whole myth of dinosaurs is quite ridiculous. Why are only, these dinosaur it's just nonsense. Anyway, not the point. Let's draw it on the wall, and then maybe we go out into that unknown and we capture the thing that we drew. And that's a really interesting thing to think about, is that when we imagine such things, we have the ability to create with our intent, and then we use our willpower to go out into the world and then to manifest that desire. It doesn't just manifest out of thin air. So it's not this new agey level, if I think it will happen. But what if I use my intentionality? Use my consciousness, use my willpower, and use all that which I've practiced to do to get something better. Have an aim and attack. And that's what we're talking about here. What is it like if you have an aim and attack? And so around this fire, we created these stories, these great stories. We would go out and we would fight these things, and we'd bring them back to our family, and we would feast, and the fire would rage, and we would dance the night away and tell grand stories of the next battle. Thus the hero was born. The great hero in the Age of Mythology. Some say that in, for instance, Julian Jaynes's The Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. He states how, and this is me paraphrasing, he states how our consciousness in pre-Socratic times in the Age of Mythology. And so let's state the Age of Mythology was from, for instance, 600 BC, pre-400 BC. I state it as 500 BC. It's in between there. And the reason is that Socrates came around the 300 to 400 BC time frame. Before him was the pre-Socratics, such names as Thales, Anaxagoras, Anaxames, and so on and so forth. I butchered those names because they're hard. I studied them for a long time. These are fellow gentlemen who were like, you know what? I'm kind of through with the mythological period of our ages and how we understand science and technology and nature. Homer was who they were all reading, right? Homer and the Age of Mythology. And so in the Age of Homer and his great epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? The Iliad, the story of the Trojan War. You get Agamemnon and you get Achilles and these great stories, and you get Odysseus. And then from there, you get the story of the Odyssey. The Odyssey is what happens when Odysseus must go back to his home. Odysseus, go back to your home. And at any time for this fine evening, please comment. And everyone out there who isn't already liking and subscribing, please do, because we are growing a community. What we're trying to do is we're trying to show others that through storytelling, we can formulate community. But it's not just culture, community, and storytelling that does this. These mythologies, these stories, this science, these things that we've made up with because of, for instance, Prometheus giving us fire. That fire wasn't just around the campfire to tell stories around. That fire did other things. And that's why then when Zeus found out that Prometheus had stolen the fire and humans started burning shit down, what ended up happening was this chaos. The fire in itself is not bad. It's that with humans, we have the ability to have free will and such. And with the ability to have free will, we do things because human nature must move. We must build and we must create. And that same breath, we must destroy, so on and so forth. These types of things were seen in the gods of the time of Homer. They were also jealous gods. They were happy gods. They were lusting gods. They did all these kinds of things, just like everybody else did. And so, interesting enough, were these things mirror images of our own very consciousness? It seems like it was. Oh, here we go. Sorry, we're doing it live. And so to go on with the story of Julian James and the bicameral mind, Homer, his epics, as we change from the Age of Mythology into the Age of Philosophy. What does that mean? Well, since fire in and of itself doesn't have the ability to only destroy, it also has the ability to create. What else has that thing? Human nature. Human nature is not perfect. We are flawed beings. And in being flawed beings, we had to understand that there's this conscious mind and an unconscious mind. We didn't learn that for a very long time. We have a left hemisphere of the brain and we have a right hemisphere of the brain. Julian James's theory was that in the Age of Homer and the Age of Mythology, which is, from whenever we understood to, as humans, to around, again, that 1000 to 600, about 600 AD or 600 BC. Again, numbers, doesn't matter. The idea is that there's this time period. And in this time period, the left and the right hemisphere of the brain supposedly didn't have the hypothalamus. It didn't have, and I got that, and maybe if I get that word right, he didn't have the ability to have the brain be stitched together. And so it seemed like when the left hemisphere, which is the Apollonian hemisphere of the brain, it's the structured and organized hemisphere of the brain, it's the analytic mind. And the right hemisphere, which is more of your creative mind, when they would be talking to each other, one is, the idea is that there was no understanding of what God was. God, they didn't know that the I spoke anything separate from ego or self, or I, ego, and self. It was different. And so what it thought was, what Julian James's idea is what Homer was talking about when the gods spoke to man, or when the gods moved through things, the forces of nature itself. It was actual gods doing it, and not nature as a force. And why it thought that is, when Achilles struck another person with his sword with the blow of Thor, right? Or with the power and strength of Jupiter, with the, whatever your god is of that time, and replace Achilles with somebody else. But the idea is that he did it with the power and strength of that god, because they didn't have a difference, because of the human body, the brain, the nervous system, the mechanics that create and mold who we are. They were separated. And then through time, through the ability to have certain kind of dietary exchanges, through growth of human consciousness and evolution, whatever that looks like for you, I do not judge. But what ends up happening with those types of things is what? We evolve. Organisms evolve through time until time is no more. We can't help it. But the way we dated history was different. So our ability to grow fast didn't happen as well because our memories were a little bit slower. We didn't have the similar kind of writings that we had. And I'm talking about, this is after the this is after Atlantis fell. This is after the Younger Dryas period, and all the different things that we're finding with how old the Sphinx is and the Great Pyramids are, as well as everything. We're after the Younger Dryas period, so things fell. The world died, and it needed to be reborn because that's the alchemical way, and that's what I'm talking about. There's this underlying pattern and structure to reality itself, and that underlying pattern and structure to reality we could call magic. Through time, humans had the ability to do what? We started to realize that what we drew and wrote down could actually happen in reality through the life that we experienced. So we took this fire from the gods that Prometheus gave us. It's never not any consequence, right? Promethea then, in that story, he got ravaged by Zeus, Zeus chained him against a rock and forever then had the bird peck out his liver and eat it over and over and over and over again. Every day this would happen. Right? The raven, the hawk, whatever bird of your choice. And so as we move through time, we start to understand that, and this is something that we're going to see in Alan Moore clip and Grant Morrison talking, is that there is a hard-coded system in our reality, in our nervous system, in the brain nervous system connection, that if we do certain things with certain kinds of symbols, we have the ability to make certain kind of change in not only our consciousness, but in the world. Because if you change your consciousness, the world changes, thus your experience with the world changes. That's a phenomenological perspective of how we exist in reality. It's that I have a perception of something, right? But before the perception can happen, I intend upon an object. And that is my perceptual intentionality of said object. But the object itself I'm not seeing. I'm seeing the perception of the object also. So there's like 3 different layers. There's many more than that in front of having a true experience of said object. And that's because my nervous system can only take in so much data at once, right? Just like you guys are right now, right? Shout out to everyone listening. It's that through this historical time frame of humans birthing different complex sorts of language to make more and more change in reality, that then civilization started to grow from mere tribal things, small groups of humans through time, to villages, to cities, to huge cities, right? We get like the great city of Babylon, the great city of Sumeria, and all the way up to, the great, these other great cities in that time frame. You get the Hellenization of the world, and Alexandria comes forth, and you get a lot of the syncretization of culture into one place. And I think that happened many times throughout these cultures, where humans would come together and magic, it would seem like reality's bending at its seams. And what I'm getting at here through this long drawn out understanding of magic, the occult and esotericism, is that what we do when we don't understand something that is in the unknown is we wrap mythology around it to try to understand these things, like the forces of nature themselves. Like in Homer. Homer wasn't, again, side note, one man. It was many people through time. It was an oral tradition that spoke. They were bards. They were magicians. These were the people that the villagers and the public would listen to be able to transmit memory and storytelling through time, which is again why it's 2025 and we are still reading Homer. There has been a lot of misconceptions of who Homer is, right? People think that he's maybe one old man, kind of like a Socrates, who's like telling a story of this epic, right? this great epic of the Iliad, of these great wars, of this hero's journey. And then he tells the story of the Odyssey, right? Of how to get home from this great journey and what it's like to swim in the realms of magic. You get the epic of Gilgamesh, right? These of Enki and Enlil, these great beings. Who are these great beings? And through time, it moves down, so forth and so on. And you get this priest class. The priest class has been all over the place. For some of you who don't know, the Abrahamic tradition stems forth from star worshipers. At the top of my head, I can't remember what they were called, the star worshipers, but that's before they moved and Abraham began and had his visions, and Sarah gave birth to Israel, or Jacob, right? Or whoever it is, before he became Israel, is which means he who wrestles with God. These are, before they started, Abraham started his thing and made these three great religions. You had many other religions at that time. And the only reason I bring this up is because of, through time, religion has been separated into the exoteric and the esoteric. The exoteric is for the masses, for people, because people have to work, sleep, procreate, rinse, repeat. We have to do the things that make us who we are so we can survive. But integrated into those things for a long time was our understanding of nature, and that is the unknown. We don't always know, and still today only have theories of what and why. We got the what's at times, but why? How, who, lightning and rain and earthquakes and tornadoes and, the seasons as they change. So what we do is we create great mythology to be able to understand those things. Thor with his great hammer Mjolnir, right? Or Zeus and, creating these certain things. And you get Hades in the underworld, or Poseidon, who's the god that is out there in the waters making these certain things happen. And in doing so, those gods interacting with humans and mortals, you get other great stories, and then so forth and so on. And as those things change, we get the pre-Socratics. The pre-Socratics, like those names like Thales and all these people. Thales, for instance, even way back in the day, understood that there were eclipses, right? That's because star worshippers were everywhere, but for some reason, I've got my theories, that idea of people worshiping stars has been so forth and so on. It's been slightly diminished. There's a lack of understanding of why, but it has happened. And so as time moves on with the pre-Socratics, they start understanding that actually maybe the mythologies of Homer and the other, and these other mythologies at that time, there were other ways of seeing things. So they started asking different questions, like, what is the base substrate? What is the cosmology of our being? Not just the stories of why things are happening, but then where did it come from? What is the base nature of everything? Is it air? Is it fire, like Heraclitus talks about? Is everything changing at all times? Is that base nature of the way things are? Is everything non-changing, like Parmenides thought? Maybe the base substrate of all things is ether, right? Aether. And then as that came and time moves on, you get these other thinkers. Now, from the pre-Socratics, we get Socrates, written through Plato. And these things are really important because Socrates started asking different questions. He started realizing that there were the sophists around and these pre-Socratic thinkers that were trying to understand things. And he wanted to ask different questions. He wanted to ask more moral and ethical questions, like what is the good? What are virtues? What is justice? You get all these different things being asked. And then Plato has many different aspects of who he is. One of the main things I didn't learn in college, because I went and got my degree in philosophy and literature, What I didn't learn in college is that Plato actually, I had to like deep dive into the different realms of the weird to understand that Plato actually learned from a bunch of people. He didn't just learn from Socrates, which was his great master. What Plato also learned from was Pythagoras, the Egyptians. Also, maybe the East, in the Middle East, the Near East, as they called it then. He learned a lot of different esoteric and occult things. And why is this important? This is important because with Plato understanding and learning these things, like being an initiate at the fields of Eleusis. What's that mean? Eleusis was a mystery school. Mystery schools are where you go and you learn esoteric knowledge through experience and ritual. You may take a substance and you may be taken through drama, but first you must learn symbol and signs. You must understand the mythologies. They may not be literal. They may be. But in not just being literal, and if they are symbolic or metaphorical or mythological, maybe there could be something more than just the body that works and feeds and procreates and continues the legacy of materiality. Maybe there's something else. And maybe that's, again, what Julian Jaynes was talking about with the breakdown of the bicameral mind, is that what happens when the left and the right hemisphere of the brain begins to stitch itself together? And then we start asking different questions because we understand that the assumptions of these gods, maybe there's something more to it. Maybe it's not that it's false, but there's more to it. And maybe I don't have to subsume myself to the gods, but through practice and ritual, through understanding signs and symbols, I can bring that divine spark within myself up to that of the gods. Not become more, because that's dangerous and treacherous, but I can have a better understanding, better experience, and then I can bring it back down and I can give it to my village, my city, my family. Right? These are important things. These are important things because of, you fast forward 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 2,025 years, right? 2,020 years, whatever it is, you fast forward to today, and today's world is so lack of meaning, or there is so much meaning in the world that it's bubbling over and we don't know what to do with it. We don't understand anymore that through history, there has been signs and symbols, mythological stories, and a structure to reality that now you can deal with and manipulate. But it's not about manipulating the outward world. It's about manipulating your own nervous system so you can have a different perception to the outward world. Thus, the outward world is changed. Stop me if you have any questions. Why are we talking about this tonight? Because this is on my mind all the time, and this is what Magus and the media is all about. The Magus is a term that comes from the Zoroastrians, which is a religion in the Near East, in Persia. Zoroastrians, they worship Zoroaster. But in that time frame, they called their priests or magicians the Magi, the magical ones, those who understand and can take in and transmit knowledge from the unknown. And so what happens through time when the left and the right brain begin to stitch themselves together, and then we start to understand that not only is there a conscious mind, which moves things forward and allows the robot, the thing that is the main four circuits of the biocomputer that John C. Lilly and Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson talk about, that I have 8 circuits of consciousness. There's many more than this. This is just a model, right? But in those main 4, they do the everyday tasks. It's the robot. The robot that does all the things that needs to be done. Otherwise, you wouldn't survive. But if you do certain techniques of consciousness changing, you have, or ingest certain substances, you have the ability to recircify yourself. You have the ability to break free from robot mentality. They call it, it is called the neurosomatic circuit in John C. Lilly's terms. John C. Lilly, brilliant man, kind of crazy. If you heard about him, he's all about doing consciousness, trying to understand consciousness. He did a lot of it with dolphins at that time frame. There's a lot of people out there who say he was part of the CIA. Him and Timothy Leary were part of the CIA, which most likely they were. But that's not the point, because at that time, they worked for Harvard. Timothy Leary was a Harvard professor doing LSD experiments. And then when LSD got made illegal, everybody abandoned him, and then he went to prison. Broke free once, went back, got out. I'm not saying what he did was right, but what I'm saying, what he did was revolutionary. Same with John C. Lilly. What he did was revolutionary. John C. Lilly is the creator of the deprivation tank. You can go to any major city today, even this one that I'm in, and there are deprivation tanks where you can go in there and you can float and have all your senses being taken away. And if you do it enough, it will break down the nervous system, where all of a sudden it makes it feel like your body feel like it's not there. And what happens to that? What happens every night when you go to sleep and you have dreams? What are dreams? Well, I don't know what dreams are, but I do know how they happen. And how they happen is the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, and my hormonal structure system interacting with my physiological system and my body system create dreams because of DMT is released from the pineal gland. Little bits every night. Also, when you were born, a massive dump of DMT happens. And when you die, these things are interesting because if you've ever taken said substance, which is highly illegal, even though there are people on X right now who, this Brian Johnson gentleman, you can just do stuff like this now and then post about it, which is wild. Wild. What happened to the days of us sitting in the campfire in the cave and finding mushrooms and ingesting them and going on one strange long trip? Or you're in the middle of an apartment with a bunch of friends and you're scared for your life because you don't know who's going to knock on the door. Or so on and so forth ad infinitum. But today, people are in the middle of blue light with their computer screens on, showing the camera that they're going to ingest a certain substance, and then what? They're going to test the body and all these things. Interesting enough, if none of you know this, they are doing DMT experiments where they intravenously put dimethyltryptamine into your bloodstream, thus making it dump for long periods of time, where then people are going into, so this is, if you've heard Terrence McKenna talk about the DMT realms, this is not a live stream about DMT, but we will get into why this is again important. But side note, going into these realms and mapping out supposedly these DMT realms, all while you are worried about finances and worried about how to get your kids to school and why the government is shut down and what war we're invading. In laboratories, people are exploring the DMT realms. Crazy, right? Okay. Let's continue our story. This is a story about you and me. This is a story about what magic is and why it's so important. The occult just means hidden. The esoteric means for a small few. Magic, some would state, is the science and art of causing change in conformity with your will. What change? So that was Crowley's statement of what magic is. Aleister Crowley. He was an initiate of the Golden Dawn. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn were a group of men who created this. They were a part of the Freemasons. But Freemasonry is not a magical society or school. It is a group of men nor is it a secret society. It is a group of men who go through certain initiations to be able to build up other men to be better men. Has this group been enlarged and it's all over the world, and have some of these people in these groups created side groups that have then done bad things in the world? Yes. All human beings in groups do bad things. Let me repeat, reverse, not all. If human beings get together in groups, not all human beings are good. Actually, every single one of you is a monster, and you just don't know it or want to admit it. And someone once stated that it's not that you're not it's not about being a hero. You can't be brave without first understanding that you are a monster, because it is the person who understands they're a monster and doesn't then do monstrous things. Those people are heroes and are brave. You are just a coward if you are the one who says, no, I am not a monster. It's like, no, you are. And you're a coward, because if you're not able to admit your monsterdom, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous because humans just are that. We don't have to use these terms, but we suffer and we sin, as in we go out into the world and we do things. And upon doing things, some of us are self-interested and some of us are selfless, but it's not all black or white. We do certain things. So it goes back to saying that the Freemasons were where the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn came from, and this explosion in the early 1900s of these magical societies. These magical societies from the Freemasons, they took on certain manuscripts from other from other magical societies and societies in the day, like the Rosicrucians and the Adepts of old. There's a lineage that goes on through time, and that lineage is brought to us by Manly P. Hall. Not brought to by, but he did a lot of study, and you can read about it. Again, why it's not a secret society is because you can just read about it. I got these books all over the place, but it's not the point, because if you don't understand the signs and symbols, you don't know what you're reading, thus you will misinterpret it. And then that work will be putrefied. It'll be inverted. And these symbols can be inverted, and once inverted and then taken through its pacing, bad things can happen from that. So again, I'm not one of those people who thinks all Freemasonry is satanic. I don't believe it's bad. I think it's actually a net good for the world. It's just put people into groups, and then some of those people will have egotistical behavior and they're going to want to do things. But a large portion of those people do great things for the world. And so let's continue. What is magic? If it's the science and art of causing change in the will, and if we change the wording a little bit like Dion Fortune did, another magical person, another artist, another individual trying to better themselves, an occultist, she changed it a little bit. And she says, it's the science and art of causing change to my own consciousness, thus causing change to the world, to the world, and conforming to my will. And I want to state that will is different than want. And this is also something that in the world of occult, magic, esotericism, even philosophy, all these things, I will fight you, whoever it is out there, with my mind, with my brain, and with my reading, that want and will are completely different. And this is something where a lot of people get wrong with do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, the saying by Aleister Crowley, the great beast. Something he doffed himself. He named himself that. So it's not like he didn't do a lot of, he was an egotist. He had a lot of great writing. Egotist nonetheless. Crazy man. But did a lot for the techniques of consciousness and consciousness itself, moving itself through. I carry on. So, how are we getting to, where we're going to today with listening to what Alan Moore and Grant Morrison talk about? Because what I'm getting to in this conversation, if you're all still with me here, what I'm getting to in this conversation is that there are signs and symbols everywhere. You just don't know they're happening. And it's time to wake up. Because if you don't wake up, somebody else is going to be manipulating your nervous system for you. And I think this is a conversation I'm going to be having a lot, because if you look at my channel, you'll see I like anime, I like movies, I like film, I like literature, I like comic books. Why do I like these things? These things are the mythologies of our time. People are making a lot of money manipulating these stories. And a lot of the time, they're not manipulating them well. And so maybe we don't have to say they're all being malevolent, but they're not being smart about it. And some of them are being malevolent, and they want to manipulate you into thinking certain things. That's why we have certain institutions like the Tavistock Institution. And there are many places out there in the world that are trying and doing certain studies and trying to make it so they understand the human condition very well. For instance, Edward Bernays, the father of modern propaganda, who changed it from propaganda to public relations. So anything you see that says public relations actually is propaganda, and it comes from Edward Bernays, you could just download his PDF. How did he know the things he knew so well? He knew it so well because his grandfather was Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychology, everything, understanding of that unconscious mind, dreams, interpretation of dreams, small red book that I have. If you want to know how the human mind works really well, that's a great start, because then you can understand how you're being manipulated. Sigmund Freud trained and taught Carl Jung. Now, Carl Jung went a different route than the whole idea of everyone's just an electra complex, or the other complex. Lost it for the moment. Sorry about that. Carl Jung went a little bit further than just trying to understand that everything was one of those two complexes. Electra and the Oedipus complex. We're doing it live. So Electra complex is, for the females out there, and the Oedipus complex is for the males out there. So what's going on is, when we're understanding these things, is that Carl Jung comes along and he says, no, that there's a collective unconscious. This is where religion and mysticism and mythology reign. And that's actually what we're trying to get to, is we're trying to understand these things, and it's within the unconscious mind. And so when we're trying to understand the unconscious mind, we're going to understand the mythology of the time frame. That's what goes back to what Magus and the media is here about. I'm doing it as fast as I can, as in getting out as many videos as I can that are done well, to try to get people to see the archetypes that run through great stories. And there are a lot of great stories out there, and two of those great people who created these great stories is Grant Morrison and Alan Moore. And so I've been doing this for the last 40 minutes, so we're going to get into the first video. Are you all ready? Are you all ready to listen to the great Alan Moore as he talks about magic and what it is, the manipulation of signs and symbols to create change in your own world? And this comes from way back in the day. And so here we are with the great Alan Moore. Anybody wants to know? I'll pull it up here. Alan Moore created a lot of movies that you all would know. Alan Moore created Watchmen. Here he is. Again, doing it live. Alan Moore created Watchmen. Alan Moore created V for Vendetta. He created a lot of graphic novels. Watchmen, V for Vendetta, Swamp Thing, Batman the Killing Joke, Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. He created From Hell. He created From Promethea, one of my favorite comic books of all time. And he's, what else? League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He's done a lot. As it says in here, Moore is an occultist, a ceremonial magician, and an anarchist. Interesting enough. Great. Love that. Has featured such themes in his work as Promethea, From Hell, and V for Vendetta, as well as performing avant-garde spoken word occult workings with The Moon and the Serpent, which the Grand Egyptian Theater of Marvels. Interesting. He just wrote a book, The Moon and the Serpent Bupper book. It's a brilliant book. So Alan Moore is amazing. He also states right here, I guess, he said, LSD was an incredible experience. Not that I'm recommending it for anybody else, but for me, it hammered home to me that reality was not a fixed thing. I say the same thing, that the reality that we saw about us every day was one reality and a valid one, but that there were others, different perspectives where different things have meanings that were just as valid. That had profound effects on me. So that is the great Alan Moore. And here now from that, we go to this tab where we're going to go into theater mode. As you all are watching, let's do it. That is the Magus card from
my 40th birthday, rather than merely bore my friends by having anything as mundane as a midlife crisis. I decided it's more interesting to actually terrify them by going completely mad and declaring myself to be a magician. This had been something that had been coming for a while. It seemed to be a logical end step in my career as a writer, and the problem is that with magic, being in many respects a science of language, you have to be very careful what you say, because if you suddenly declare yourself to be a magician without any knowledge of what that entails, then one day you are likely to wake up and to discover that that is exactly what you are. There is some confusion as to what magic actually is. I think that this can be cleared up if you just look at the very earliest descriptions of magic. Magic, in its earliest form, is often referred to as the art. I believe that this is completely literal. I believe that magic is art, and that art, whether that be writing, music, sculpture, or any other form, is literally magic. Art is, like magic, the science of manipulating symbols, words or images, to achieve changes in consciousness. The very language of magic seems to be talking as much about writing or art as it is about supernatural events. A grimoire, for example, the Book of Spells, is simply a fancy way of saying grammar. Indeed, to cast a spell is simply to spell, to manipulate words, to change people's consciousness. And I believe that this is why an artist or writer is the closest thing in the contemporary world that you are likely to see to a shaman.
It's brilliant. Isn't that brilliant? It's so well spoken.
I believe that all culture must have arisen from cult. Originally, all of the facets of our culture, whether they be in the arts or the sciences, were the province of the shaman. The fact that in present times this magical power has degenerated to the level of cheap entertainment and manipulation is, I think, a tragedy. At the moment, the people who are using shamanism and magic to shape our culture are advertisers. Rather than trying to wake people up, their shamanism is used as an opiate to tranquilize people, to make people more manipulable. Their magic box of television, and by their magic words, their jingles, can cause everybody in the country to be thinking the same words and have the same banal thoughts all at exactly the same moment.
And that's what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about that. I'm talking about how that's exactly it, is that people are manipulating us. And you don't have to be manipulated anymore. It's that when you understand these signs and symbols, you can formulate a whole world of illusion, of a simulation, a simulacra, as some would state, that the Matrix has you, and you don't need to be had any longer. And so with these stories, we can find ourselves within our own reworking of ourselves. It's that fire from Prometheus. It was able to be cast upon the world. And so fire is one of those things that not only gives, but it also burns. But burning doesn't have to be bad. And so what it can do is it can have the main base understanding of alchemy, of solve coagula, as Alan Moore is going to talk about in this next clip, is that we must dissolve that which isn't useful anymore, the mundane self. And upon dissolving that, we're going to bring back together, we're going to bind back together something new. And so that's really important, because once you understand that all magic is, if reality and magic are kind of like very interchangeable, that if we understand how language is being used, then we can understand the magic of our age. We can understand the different spells that are being cast on us. So let's move on to the next brilliant little understanding from Moore himself. Here we are. More of a fun thing that's going on. Alan Moore is a wild person.
Magic is political.
Look at him.
Magic is social. Magic is cultural. Magic is pretty much everything.
Doesn't he look like a magician? Doesn't he have a long beard? The things that he was written, if you read it, it's life-changing.
Back to around about 1993 at my 40th birthday party, when I'd had a little bit to drink, I have to confess. And
he's telling the same story again, but there's a little bit clearer. The first one was from Mindscape of Alan Moore.
Become a magician.
Everyone should watch a Mindscape of Alan Moore.
Of course, the next morning when you wake up, you think, oh my God, I'm going to have to actually do that now, or else I'm going to look stupid. And if I do it, I'm probably going to look stupid. I see language, art, consciousness, and magic as being four facets of the same phenomenon. To me, creativity and magic are almost interchangeable. Our culture today is entirely acted out amongst the butchered parts and components of magic. What happens is, when we get urban civilizations, for the first time, you can get specialization. You can get, for example, a priesthood who will take away magic's spiritual function.
And through time, that is exactly what has happened.
Bastards, artists and writers who will take away magic's function as the dispenser of visions. And the birth of what we now recognise as modern science, which emerged out of alchemy. It emerged out of magic. And of course you've got medicine, but it still had the inner world, the world of the interior, the world of the mind. That was still magic's territory. Until 1910, when Sigmund Freud came along and removed that last vestige of what magic was all about, leaving only the empty theatrics.
See what I tell you?
Yes,
Sigmund Freud, what a bastard.
Magic. But this is actually just part of a central magical formula. This is the alchemical formula of solve et coagula. Solve means it's basically analysis. It means breaking a thing down to its smallest component. The second part of the formula, coagula, is synthesis. It is placing those parts back together in a hopefully improved form, or at least a better understood form. And it seems to me that that is perhaps what needs to happen with magic, and hence with culture and society in the present day. We should be seeing this coherence starting to emerge from out of the complete state of dissolution that society seems to be in at the moment. With the activism and the protest and the organisation,
It's the V for Vendetta mask
is arising in opposition to figures like Donald Trump, that we can perhaps see, optimistically, we can perhaps see the beginnings of that kind of coherence, that kind of process. That to me is what Magick is about. It is everything in our world.
Magick is everything in our world, he just stated. And he just kind of, obviously you can see that I have been deeply affected by him and these people's writings. He's, if you look through the magicians through time, you go all the way back to, again, the stories of Homer and the Iliad, where they're talking about magic and, Odysseus trying to get back home. And all of a sudden he's caught by one of the first witches, Circe, on the island. And you go through that whole thing. You move forward and you get Socrates and Plato. Plato was talking about magic. He was initiated into the Eleusinian mystery schools, initiated to the cults of Pythagoras and the Egyptians. These mystery schools took on certain rituals that helped people understand the movements of the stars, the movements of the seasons, and so forth and so on. As we move through, we get Iamblichus, a Neoplatonic thinker, who was supposedly just as great as, he was just as wise and as smart as the great Plato. And we move forward. Iamblichus, that's where we get the term theurgy from, the theurgios, or that divine working of trying to take that internal spark and move it to and reach the stars. But that's more like Proclus and Plotinus. What theurgy for Iamblichus is we're not only moving up to the divine, but we're going to bring the divine into us and have a divine embodiment of your human with divinity. And I think that's really important. I think that's why Iamblichus stands out outside of his counterparts and teachers, Proclus and Plotinus and the like, is that he was a well thought out embodied thinker, that in his embodiment, he was like, no, we need the body. We're not upset with materiality. We're not saying that I'm one of them Gnostic thinkers who's and Gnostic as in one of the cults in that time who thought the body was evil and a black iron prison. That's not what Iamblichus was doing. He was saying that with this divine working, what we can do is that we have a chance here to do something that other animals are not doing, and maybe even higher beings aren't or cannot do in that great chain of being that we start to get when we get to magicians and occultists as, Agrippa and the like, where it's like the angels and the archangels and the elementals and all these things, they don't get to participate in the material realm like humans do. And so humanity is special. And that could be our own delusions of grandeur, right? But when we create stories, we do it because we don't understand something or we want to remember something. So why not cast a spell upon ourselves, right? To bring in the anime into this, you get Naruto, right? The whole idea of what's happening in Naruto, besides when you get to Kaguya, right? Let's not get into the very ending with Kaguya, but what we're understanding is that Madara, through Obito and his vast amount of playing puppet with the whole universe in Naruto, was that he was trying to place everybody into the infinite Tsukiyomi. What is that? Well, symbolically, what we get here is he was trying to place a hallucination upon the world to bring people into their great dream. Everybody would then be enraptured in that great dream, and then people wouldn't have to have suffering again. Well, the problem with what he was doing was that he didn't understand what the divine tree, where all the chakra, all the energy system from these great eternal forces that they called the tailed beasts in that realm, when you put them, there's 10 of them, well, there's 9 of them. When you put them all together, it creates the 10th beast, the 10 tails. Interesting enough, even though this is a Japanese story, you get that interesting thing of like 1 to 9 in the tree of life, right? But there's the 10th Sephirah. There are 10 Sephiroths in this, just like when you put all the 9-tailed beasts together, you get the 10 tails. And then that is this great almighty beast that then helps Madara put an infinite Tsukuyomi onto the moon. What is that? That's an eye that is cast upon the moon, and then it casts this hallucination upon everyone in that world. Well, that was not done well, because what ended up happening is that hallucination, as they were enraptured into it, the tree that this was connected all to gathered and placed everybody in these little cocoons and pods and stole everybody's energy. Not cool, right? Not too cool. Don't take my energy. Don't steal my loosh. That is what I'm getting at in this, is that we're not here to give loosh away anymore. I don't want to give my loosh away. What is loosh? We could call it energy. You could call it prana. You could call it chi. Doesn't matter where you're at. It's the same thing. And it's that there are these systems in place, and people out there can also do it. They steal that energy away from you, even though you're put into this great dream. This great dream realm. Well, what are we at now? This great dream is breaking apart. And why it's so important to understand magic. Why is it so important to understand mysticism, right? So you get magic, which is performing these rituals and having a certain cosmological substrate for your own thinking and experiences. You blend that with mysticism, which is your, for instance, this is one model. This is your meditation, the calming of the mind, these certain practices that help integrate the magic. So there's ritual, and then there's yoga, right? Yoga, not the hatha yoga where you go to these studios and you do, your asanas, which is part of the mystical system of, say, the 8 limbs of yoga by Patanjali's system. That is a great working that Crowley used, and a lot of the magicians of the time in the early 1900s, and for a very long time. So Patanjali doesn't have just like a fucking corporate trademark onto these things. What it does is they help each other. They're integrated system, so to speak, where if you do both, your magic will work better. Because if magic is the science and art of causing change into conformity to your will, in the conformity with your will, if it's to cause change in your consciousness, thus making change in the world, because we're not here to manipulate others as, say, the sons of Freud, right? The sons of Belial is in one book that they call them, and then there's the children of light, right? Nonsensical Gaia words. But what I'm trying to get at here is that the adept ship through time is trying to help trying to help civilization through rough patches. And through time, magic has to become hidden. And then in time, magic can come out back into the world so we can create a better place to be. And right now we're in one of those times where institutions run rampant, that they're holding us in this genjutsu, this great dream. And this dream isn't great anymore. The American dream is crumbling and shattering. We don't see the same pretty colors in the sky. You can't just run around on the streets, ride a bike, wherever you want to go. Parents don't really know where you are. And then you just show up in the evening and everything's okay and safe. Because to be honest, it was never okay and it was never safe. And what I mean by that is, it's not that with the age of information and the age of AI, that since we have social media and we have all these things out there that we can monitor and see more information faster and news travels faster. What I'm trying to say is that things have always been happening. The world has got a rot underneath it. And that rot is that husk, the hollow, the clip-loff that I speak of. And it's a good metaphor and symbol of the demonic realm, the realm where if you don't and are not in charge of your own nervous system and your own embodiment, if you're not cleansing and purifying in the alchemical process, and if you allow culture, if you allow the sorcerers of our time continue to cast spells over you, then you aren't in charge of your world. And I'm not saying I am any of the things. I am a man trying to become better. And you're helping me because through this, I can formulate my words and cut through the nonsense and really build a better version of myself. I can take that Promethean fire, that Promethean spark, and I can set ablaze my heart and my mind and that Dantian, that inner fire that helps my Kung Fu power move through the world. And so we move forth in this conversation and we move on. But before we move on, I do want to state that Alan Moore created something called Promethea. Promethea is one of my favorite comic books and favorite stories of all time, and I think everybody should read it. It is over here. Underneath the Invisibles, we have Promethea. I'm pointing at it. And then underneath Promethea is the Moon and Serpents bumper book by Alan Moore. It's amazing. I also think people should buy that. But Promethea, we'll get to in the Invisibles, but these two books, the Invisibles and the Promethea, if you know me, if you've seen me on my journey, move through it, I've been talking about these books forever. Another one, the Illuminatus trilogy, Robert Anton Wilson. If we have time, we'll talk about that. But first, we're going to go over here and we get these guys. Oh, above it, The Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie. Brilliant. It's got all your rituals. Above that, Marsilio Ficino, 3 books on life. Amazing. Brilliant. I highly recommend reading the Hermetic Tradition, Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Traditions, and they will talk a lot about Ficino. He's a very wise and smart man. That's not what we're talking about today. Today, we're talking about what is magic, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, and the art of storytelling, basically, and why stories are so important. And if you don't understand why stories are so important yet, just keep listening. Listen more. Listen to this. Subscribe, like, and share. Don't forget, hit that notification bell, and so we can continue to do this more and more. But Promethea is something that I think everyone should go pick up. And I'm going to tell you exactly what it's about. It has changed my life, and it will change yours. So I'm just going to pull up the wiki so it's a lot easier. Wiki, I don't really, we do what we can with Wikipedia and whoever the overlords of Wikipedia are. Promethea, created by Alan Moore, J.H. Williams III, and Mick Gray. J.H. Williams III is one of the greatest comic book artists I've ever seen. If you think different, you can fight me. I also like Alex Ross, but that's not the same. So this tells the story of Sophie Bangs, a college student from an alternative, futuristic New York City in 1999, who embodies the powerful entity known as Promethea, whose task it is to bring upon the apocalypse. Originally published in 32 issues from 1999 to 2005, the series has been republished into 5 graphic novels and 1 hardback issue. Moore weaves elements of magic and mysticism along with superhero mythology and action, spirituality, and the afterlife. In particular, the Tree of Life. That's interesting. In particular, the Tree of Life. How about it, like Sophie climbs up and down the Tree of Life, that she's like, you go through every Sephiron stuff. So it's not just in particular, it's like many of those volumes are dedicated to the Tree of Life and her learning about it. Why? Because that is one of the backbones of, since the Renaissance and pre that, the Tree of Life is the backbone to the magical, to the magician and the occult sciences. Anyway, plot summary. It's fascinating. This is why. In the 5th century AD, a Christian mob threatens the home of a magician in Hellenistic Egypt. He tells his daughter, Promethea, to flee into the desert, hoping the gods of the ancient world will preserve her. The story shifts to New York City in the late 20th century. Sophie Bangs is hoping to interview a woman named Barbara Shelley for a college paper on Promethea, a character who seems to reoccur in literature and pop culture through the centuries. And it does. Promethea is a character that Alan Moore kind of like revivified into this character. She's been talked about for a very long time, and I have a few of those stories. A character who seems to reoccur in literature. You don't want to go looking for folklore, Shelley says, hostile in her warning. Especially you don't want folklore to come looking for you. This is a dire warning, and it's very true, and it's in a lot of things. And the reason is the mind is like the Jinnabide. It's got jewels and beauties and worlds galore of amazing things, but it also has the Jinnabide. It has the dark depths of the unconscious. And in that darkness, there are things there. And when you go walking into the darkness without the correct tools, it could be hard for you. Been there. Anyway, let's move on. After departing, Sophie is tracked and attacked by a creature known as Shmi. Just as things look bleakest for Sophie, she is rescued by Barbara, who has mystical powers and is now dressed as Promethea. She informs Sophie the only reason she would be attacked is if someone suspects she will become the next vessel for Promethea. It turns out that Promethea is called to the world when someone uses their imagination to make her real. As they hide from the pursuing Smee, the weakened and fatally injured Barbara instructs Sophie to write a poem about Promethea, hoping Sophie is indeed the successor, and the creative expression is a way to get Sophie in the correct state of mind to allow herself to become Promethea. Barbara's idea works, and from that night, Sophie becomes Promethea, and she defeats the Smee. The story continues with Sophie at Promethea, learning about Promethea and the previous individuals who have spent time as the vessels of her. In the days that follow, the hospital where Barbara is attacked by demons, and the acts of Barbara's death, Barbara dies, blah, blah, blah. Move forward. They end up climbing up the spheres and the suffer of the tree of life. Sophie, who is Promethea, and Barbara, who is also Promethea, right, encounter difficulties such as imprisoned by the demon Asmodeus, as well as meeting figures such as Sophie's father, Juan, Barbara's guardian angel, Boo-Boo, and Promethea's father, who she has not seen since her murder in 411 AD. And eventually she climbs all the way up and she comes all the way back. And when she comes back, what she has to do is she has to bring upon the end of the world. She has to eschatize the escatron. Escatize the escatron is a way of saying to bring on the apocalypse. Apocalypse means also the unveiling. And so it's a really interesting this story, because what it does is that it changes you as you read it. So I recommend everybody to read it. J.H. Williams III, as he was designing a few of those Sephirah, he designed Gabura, or Mars. It's on the left side of the tree of severity. And it is just that, the Martian power of when divinity comes down the tree, to make sure that it is pure, it must go through that Martian, the Mars energy of war. And it's not bad war. It's that to go up and down the tree, you're up like, you're either up like a serpent or down like a dove, but that tree from Kether to Malkuth is like a lightning rod. And to come back up it, you must also be pure. So you cannot go into the higher supernull of the original triad unless you are pure of heart and have sacrificed the ego along the way. Enough of that. My point is, J.H. Williams III basically tripped balls as he was writing all the Sephirah, and when he got to that, he got so sick because of art and magic are integrated. That is what I'm talking about. When you are true of purpose, true of intent, disciplined in your practice, and your will is strong, your art is magic. That is one of the reasons I hate postmodernism. I destroy pure destruction. That is what postmodernism is, pure deconstructionism. Where is the rebuild? Anybody who out there wants to fight me on it, they can. I'll debate you. I'll debate anybody. Let's move forth. So, interesting enough, from Promethea, we move on to the Alan Moore, the great chaos magician, Alan Moore. This one is a little bit longer, so we're going to go through this one nicely. Grant Morrison is a Scottish comic book writer, screenwriter, and producer. He's known for his nonlinear narratives, humanist philosophy, and countercultural leanings. Morrison has written extensively for the American comic book publishers DC, penning lots of things like Animal Man, Doom Patrol, so on and so forth. He published The Invisibles, which is one of my favorite comic books of all time. He's done a lot of things. All-Star Superman, amazing. He did his run on Batman. It was brilliant. Sorry, since we're doing it live, I didn't show you what I was talking about. This is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Grant Morrison. The old Grant Morrison. Great. And, done well. Grant Morrison's done well for self. You get what I mean if you're out there listening. I love Grant Morrison. I love his work. I love work. I love Vay's work. Not the point. Okay. I try to speak proper. Doesn't always work well. I'm trying to respect everyone's feelings. Doesn't always work well. But this is where we're at. Okay. This is the great Grant Morrison. So I will state that in my own time period and in my own life and how I've moved along in my journey, I had a time period where I studied philosophy in college and also the rebellious experimental stages of my own magical madness and mysticism in my apartment. So we're all hermits in our own way. We all expand our mind in our own way. And reading Promethea was one of them. Reading The Invisibles was another. I found this. This is a short clip from the longer clip. I found this a long time ago. The beginning is him screaming. He's coming up on a bunch of hash and he gets deep into magic and such. So this is his take. Grant Morrison and Alan Moore are at odds. There is a picture that if I can pull it up fast, I will show you, and it kind of shows why and why it's so funny. No, I'm not gonna be able to find it. It's the picture of the Sorcerer Supreme and Alan Moore and his minion Grant Morrison. It's hilarious. I've put it in some of my videos. I think they're both very special individuals, and for me, they've both been monumental in my own growth. And so anything that to understand this at a time when I was growing up and trying to understand the world, when I was trying to be my own superhero, still am to today. I just understand it a little bit differently. Here we are with Grant Morrison and his DisinfoCon conversation.
We are! Right! Fuck, man. I'll tell you, when I was a kid, I read Robert Anton Wilson and all this shit, and here we are, we're standing here, we're talking about this shit, and it's real. Okay, I'm pissed, and in half an hour I'm going to come up on drugs, so watch for it. I guess, I don't know, is there any practicing magicians in the audience? Put your hand up if we got any. Yeah, come on, bold!
Come on, bold!
Okay,
He's hilarious, listen to that.
Practicing magicians. This shit's easy, right? I'm like you. Basically, why are we here, right? Why are we here at this thing? What's this all about? And by the way, this is a Scottish accent. So, reset the filters and pretend it's Sean Connery talking to you, okay? 007. Right. So if you can follow me, I'm just going to talk the way I talk, and fuck you if you don't understand me.
Fuck you if you don't understand.
The deal is this. I've been writing this comic for the last 6 years, and the weird thing was, like you, like everyone here, we're trying to figure what's going on. Why do we feel different? Why don't we fit into this world? Why do we think that they're not telling us the truth? So I went out and I read Robert Anton Wilson's books when I was 20 years old, which is 20 years ago now. And I figured, is this guy bullshitting me? He says we can talk to aliens, we can talk to people from Sirius. Is he talking crap? He said Aleister Crowley's got methods for contacting alien intelligence and for changing the world. Is he talking crap? So I did it. And no, he's not talking crap. Right? And we can all do it. And this is by way of trying to demolish the counterculture and replace it with something useful. We're just going to start here and see where we get to. When I started doing The Invisibles, which is a comic book for people who haven't seen the thing, it's a comic book which is kind of my attempt to explain what happened to me after I'd been abducted by aliens in Kathmandu in 1994. And the only reason I was abducted by aliens in Kathmandu in 1994 is because I went to Kathmandu in 1994 to be abducted by aliens. And it works, right? And these fuckers, they will turn up. And what they told me was this, and they tell everyone the same bullshit, but it's in different.
And I want to state how, if you caught his language and his wording, he wanted to be abducted by aliens. So what he did was he went to Kathmandu to go and do that. And so that's what's really important. He uses intention and his will to create change in his world, to put himself into a place where then through these practices, he had the ability to do exactly what he set out to do. And if you don't know that those things are out there and they can be done, you'll never do them, which is then why it's important to understand the stories that we watch and listen to who are talking true to us, who have archetypical hero journey, delving into the unconscious and seeing the mystery of the world, both inner and outer, that's not just for those in the story realms, but that's for each and every one of us if we have the ability and the perception and the willpower to do so. And you do. No one out there doesn't, no matter where you live. I truly believe that. It doesn't matter where, even if you're in the gutter on the side streets of some strange city or in some culture, third world culture, everyone has the ability to do magic, to make better of themselves, even if they don't have the correct coin or dollar signs or status to do so. Even if your world is nothing but pure suffering, that's the only way we actually can get out of that pure suffering. And sometimes it takes quite some time to do it.
Perspective, it's from different nervous systems. It seems to be filtered through everyone's own view of the world, but they keep telling us the same shit. So I met these guys. I'm sitting in the roof garden of the Vajra Hotel in Kathmandu, and I was doing tons of dope, but in my defence, I do like a quarter of dope a day, and I've been doing it since 1990.
Dope equals hash. So hash is cannabis.
And as you all know, everyone out there who's ahead and who knows what I'm talking about, you don't hallucinate, right? If you go to the garage, it's the fucking garage. If you go to the 7-Eleven, it's the fucking 7-Eleven. You might be stoned, you might be picking up lots of interesting little bits and pieces that you don't normally get when you're straight, but you know what's real and you know what's not real. So, as I say, in my defence, man, I was loaded. But this was the end of a week in which I'd been loaded every single day, and I'm sitting up there in the roof garden, and suddenly these fuckers arrive. And they arrive en masse, and they look exactly like Terence McKenna described. Why is that? Because I just read Terence McKenna a year before. What they told me was they took me out of my body. I wasn't in my body anymore. This doesn't normally happen with hash. This happens on DMT, or it happens on ketamine or something, right? I'm on hash, a tiny little bit, size of a lentil, and I start tripping, and I'm out of my body. And these fuckers are there, and they said, "Where do you want to go?" The first thing I said was Alpha Centauri, which is the first thing
Alpha Centauri.
And they took me to Alpha Centauri, and it's fucking real. It's there. There's 3 suns. The whole thing was moving exactly as we're told it's supposed to move astronomically. And I'm there, and I said to them, "Oh, what the hell's going on here?" As you might. And they said, "We've come to tell you this stuff so that you can put it in your work and explain it to the world." Right? Why do they always say that to everyone? Why do they always tell everyone to go out and tell the world what's going on, and everyone tells us the same shit? So these things, I met them, and what they were was like silver, like those things you get in rave videos, basically silver morphing mercurial blobs of chrome that think. And they took me to the 5th dimension. And the 5th dimension is outside space and time, and they explained to me what time is all about. The universe we live in is designed to grow larvae, right? Believe it, don't you? I don't have to believe it, I'm just setting the story here. They explained to me that beyond space and time, we have our actual selves. These things that we're experiencing right now are sections through time. Everyone in here is a section through time. But in actual fact, you're not experiencing your real body. What is your real body? Your real body is a process that starts when you're born and it moves forward until you die. That is you. Seen from outside, that's what you look like. You look like a gigantic centipede spread around all the little things that you always do, up and down through your house, up the stairs, down to the store, back. And it's a centipede. It's us, right? It starts as a little baby and it comes out your mother's womb and it gets bigger. And that is the process in time. Like I say, we're experiencing sections now, so we don't spend a lot of time thinking about this. But think of ourselves as processes through time, which is what we actually are. We all know we were 12. We all know we were 10 years old. Where is that? Point to it. Show me that you at 10 years old, and yet you were there. So these things said to me, this is what's going on. We use time to grow larvae, because outside space and time you can't grow anything because it's timeless. Nothing grows. What you want to do, if you want to make one of these higher dimensional beings who's actually us already, is you grow it in time. So you make a universe. And how you make a universe is you plug a little part of yourself into the information world that they live in, which is what I seem to be experiencing, is a sea of pure information. And they exist in that, but there is no time. Time is part of that, but this is the fifth dimension. It's time, space, breadth, depth, plus. And they said to me, the universe you live in, the world you're living on, is a larvae. Every single one of us here is the same thing. There's no distinction. All we do, we don't understand what we are. And they explained to me, if you've got a two-dimensional field, say, flat plane, you stick your hand through it, there's one hand there, but if you stick your hand through a two-dimensional plane and there's two-dimensional entities who live on there, they will see 4 circles, right? 4 distinct, completely different circles. But no, it's the one hand. Every one of us in here is the same fucker. We're all the same thing, according to these weirdos. And what we are is intersected. Thank you. I'm glad someone agrees. What we are is intersections through 4D space-time. So, yeah, I look like this. I stop here. No, I don't stop here. I've been here for, what, 5 minutes now? Where was that guy who was here 5 minutes ago? Right, where is he? Point to him. But he was existed. You all saw him. I saw you 5 minutes ago. Where is that guy? So this led me, obviously, up some very strange alleyways. And these things explained to me that, as I say, the universe is some kind of larval entity. What it does is it proceeds through stages of development. Now, if you think about a fetus in the womb, and there's a famous phrase that says, what is it, phylogeny recapitulates, evolution or whatever the fuck it is. Forget the good bits. But there's the idea that if you've got a fetus, it starts off, it goes through every single thing. It starts as a unicellular entity, it splits, it becomes a lizard, it becomes a mammal, eventually it becomes a human. And they said to me, the culture you're living in is, understand it this way, phylogeny recapitulates history. So what we're actually watching is this thing coming towards self-awareness and coherence in the same way that a fetus does. We haven't even been born yet. There is no adult on this planet. There's not one adult on this planet, which explains a lot. And it explains why we let fuckers like Bill Clinton bomb the Kosovans. It explains why I let Tony Blair put cameras in the streets.
Explains why we let the Patriot Act take hold.
Punk rock, dude. This is a Donna Karan suit. Fuck it. So leading on from these ridiculous, where do you go from that? So I was told this stuff and I come out, and I'm just this little kid from Govan in Glasgow, which is a real dodgy area. And I didn't go to university, I left school at 18, but suddenly I found out that if you do these things that you're told by Alistair Crowley, by Wilson, by all these people we read and all these people we've been consuming, but we don't do it, if you actually do what they say, things happen. Things occur exactly as it's described, and we can all do it. So I decided to put this to use in the comic book that I was doing, this thing called The Invisibles. And the idea was to kind of get all this down on paper and somehow look at it, not to accept it as reality, to accept it as purely, this is part of human experience. It's a part of human experience that has been described to us for thousands and thousands of years, but for the last 200 has been hidden and made occult for some reason that I don't understand, but it seems to have to do with the Industrial Revolution and corporate culture. So these things happen. Magic works. And when I started doing the comic, I found that you could actually make magic happen by writing things and changing the operating system of the universe. It works, and I'm here to tell you to try it when you go home tonight, because it fucking works. And what happens if we all do it? Everyone in this room decides to take control of reality. I'm talking about reality. I'm talking about quantum physics. I'm talking about taking control of things from the quantum level up, from the molecular level up, and it works. This magic works. So I'll tell you something you can do while I'm here. One of the best techniques and one of the easiest techniques to prove that this thing works is to practice sigil magic. The technique is simple. Have a desire tonight. Go home and do this. Don't listen to this shit. Don't listen to my bullshit and go home and think, yeah, we are the fucking counterculture. Do it. Do it, and we will change the world, right? Because I did it. I didn't trust those guys. I didn't trust Will.
This is a man from the 80s for sure, with the way he looks. You know what I'm saying?
I tell you it works, and you can do it. We can all do it. Number one, first thing you do, write down a desire. Make it something easy that is likely to happen, something possible, rather than say, you know, I'm going to be king of the moon, which you may want to be, as we all do, but it's kind of hard to be king of the moon. You're going to have to get a rocket and go up there. So pick something easy. If you want to sigilize for a lottery win, make sure you buy a ticket, or else it won't work. So these are the conditions within the material universe that we live in. One of the things we're actually dealing with is some kind of operating system that can be hacked using words. And words seem to be the binding agent for this thing, whatever it is. So I wrote this comic book, and as I wrote it, it became true. Things I would make the characters do became true. The main character was, I gave him a bald head and a leather jacket because I thought people would like me when they read the comic. And bald heads were really uncool back in 1992. And it worked. I found that if I put the character through a situation where he was being tortured, where his lungs had burst and he was being held in captivity and subjected to all these awful things, 3 months later I'm in hospital, 2 burst lungs, dying of blood poisoning and facing exactly the same shamanic trial that I put my character through. So once I figured out that, I thought, well, the best thing to do is give this guy an easy time in the future. So as a result of all this, I just split up with my girlfriend, and I said, okay, I want a new one, and I want it to look exactly like this chick in the comic, because she's cool, you know. So I did a sigil. A month later, the girl turns up. Then another one, then another one, then another one, then another one. All aspects of this character, and I realized, oh fuck, this is insane.
So to finish that, he's talking about the comic book, The Invisibles. What he's also talking about is sigil magic. Sigil magic, when it's done that way, is a low magic. There's 2 different styles of magic when we're talking about magic in the occult. There's low magic and high magic. High magic is what I was talking about with theurgy, bringing down or bringing up, uniting with the divine, the ability of divine working, or making yourself a better individual, a better human. Thus, all these things happen. He's talking about low magic, and that's a way to understand your surroundings, to get small little things here and there, you know, to find your keys, and to do what he said, you know, with his sigil. He created a hyper-sigil, and that's the comic book, The Invisibles, right here. And he did put himself in it. The character's name is King Mob, and he's a badass. He's an assassin, and he's a mystic. He's a martial arts master. He's a womanizer. He's all these different things. I'm not saying badasses or womanizers. You get the point. He was trying to, this main character had main character syndrome. But the whole idea is that one of the main characters' name is Jack Frost. The Invisibles are a group of individuals. They create cells. Each cell has 5 individuals. All individual, every person in those cells is an element, and they change elements. So as they're moving through the world, like the triple agents that they are, because they're not for any 3-letter agency, the Invisibles work for the good. So that's the brilliance of this. And then the bad people are working for the Matrix, or the Yog Sothoth. He intersects Lovecraftian cosmic horror into his novel, because that's the beauty of storytelling. H.P. Lovecraft created a story where he was trying to understand, not even consciously maybe doing it, the unconscious aspects of the human syndrome, of humanness. And in doing so, he created the old gods, the elder gods, whatever these things that reign in the pure chaos of being, as planets and suns and solar systems and universes are giving birth. These forces have thingness. They're egregores. They're created and have existence through time because of the stories that we tell. And is it because of the stories that we tell? That's a theory. I don't know. Maybe they are real, as in, maybe we're telling the story because they're forces that we remember in the unconscious realm. I don't know. I take it as probably that one, that I'm an idealist when it comes to these things. I think consciousness came first and then materiality stemmed off of that. That is me. However, your nervous system sees the world, you're going to participate and kind of see the manifold and aspects of existence as such through that, right? And through time, as he was talking about, through his own manipulation of his nervous system by manipulating words and symbols and language, he was able to create this sigil, this hyper-sigil, this story right there, the invisibles. And he, as being the creator of this world, the things that he did to himself in the book happened to him in real life. And so he went on to do a lot of brilliant work with DC, with Batman, with Superman, and a bunch of other things. He created whole worlds. And that's some of the greatest runs of DC Comics and Marvel Comics that I've ever seen. His run on X-Men was amazing. And that's what I love about it, is that you get to see the occult sciences, the magic and the esoteric, the archetypical journeys, the hero's journey of Campbell and the mythologies of our past change, as they should. Because it's this amorphous thing that he was talking about that moves through the world and is trying to wake up. And both Moore and Morrison talked about it. For some reason in history, we go through dark ages. And maybe it's the dark age through one and enlightenment through the other. But the enlightenment period from Cartesianism until where we're at today, really, I can't think of any great philosophers in our modern period, which is sad, because there's a lot of charlatans, there's a lot of good psychologists, there's a lot of good people out there. But why we're still talking about Socrates and Plato today, Iamblichus today, and Iamblichus not so much in the modern mainstream, but for sure people are talking about Socrates all the time. His very name and image is imprinted into our very nervous system because of what he did. These were great magicians, bards, and storytellers who then took story and started asking bigger questions. And then all of a sudden you get theories of the Platonic forms, you get the Republic, you get Aristotle, being a student of Plato. And then from Aristotle on, he was more of an empiricist of knowledge, right? Of epistemology, instead of the idealist, the Platonist that Plato was. But we get our great religions from those things because it gives those great religions a system, even if it is a system of control. And so on and so forth. As we move forward, they were talking about why are these things hidden? And that's something I've stated many times to not only you all out there, but to my friends and to my family and to my loved ones. Maybe not my family so much. They laugh, right? They're like, okay, I love you. Whatever makes you happy. But it's one of those things where it's like, the knowledge is all out there. I'm looking at the books right now, but the books are nothing without the experience and the practice. But the mainstream media and governments and religions, they only, for some reason or another, veer toward the exoteric, the shell of things. But they don't want to get into the substance of things, the esoteric, because supposedly it's only for a few. So the priestcraft through time were corrupted and they hoarded all this knowledge for themselves. Nietzsche actually wrote about it in his own right in the master-slave philosophies that he has, is that the masters used to be the great warriors of our time. They go around and they would do what they wanted, and the priestcraft had to do what they do. They had to create and manipulate and be the only ones to understand certain languages and read certain things. Thus the slaves weren't slaves to the warriors, but became slaves to the priests. And this just happens. And they become the keepers of the keys, of the Holy Grail, of the Philosopher's Stone. And then they deem anything that can put humans into the divine realms or bring the divine into them, and they call it heresy. And you're a heretic and you're burnt at the stake. Say, a la, the witches crucified, a la Christ, or Giordano Bruno, or, right? Any of those other great names. Copernicus and Galileo, these people moved mountains with their thought about what the stars were like. And the church didn't like that very much. Get the Dark Ages. the Inquisitions, just because people want to hold power. And if the power that I've been spewing forth for now, this time that we've been here all together, is the power of the individual to rise again, to take on and become disciplined in their action and their thought, understand that you are not your thoughts, but that if you don't get your thoughts in order, they will become you, as in they will take over who you are. And then the world that is around you will not be yours. It'll be somebody else's. It'll be the person that is controlling the symbols and the signs, the marketing and the advertisers, the governments of the world and the mainstream mockingbird media. So what I'm trying to say in this, what is magic? What is storytelling and why are they so important? What I said before is that magic is all around us. It's everything. It's like in Star Wars when they were trying to talk about the Force. It's everywhere at all times. It's not something as flimsy as Star Wars science fiction magic or as Harry Potter magic, but there's something beautiful that lies within these very things. Then the beauty is in that it actually is all around you, everywhere, at all times. And you do have the ability to tap into it with certain techniques, practices, and embodied experience through storytelling and mythology. So if you have the ability to, which you do, is to find your own myth. And if you can't find it, write your own myth. And in doing so, find your magic. Realize that you are the hero on your journey and that together we can all do this, move forward in this world of the strange, that no matter what happens, you are always with yourself. And as we go upon the end of this stream, if anybody has any comments, questions, or concerns, please type it in the comments. We are towards the end of the stream on this beautiful November 10th evening. So please, I would like to state, subscribe, like, and share so we can grow this community larger. So I can continue to do this here with you as we continue to tell the great stories of old, the great mythologies of old, and we break down the new modern myths of our day, that which lie in anime, literature, comic books, film, and media of all kinds. It's all around us. I say thank you. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and good night.